Hello, welcome to today's stream, everybody. It's a new for Palestine Bookshelf. We're doing a back-to-back double feature stream, and mostly due to my own fault regarding scheduling. I had planned to do the discussion of No Other Land last week, but scheduling mishap on my part, couldn't do it. Didn't want to delay this because I knew that it was coming out on streaming this week worldwide, or last week rather. So I didn't want to delay it any further. I want this to be in the discussion. I was not prepared for how fine of a film it really is. I knew that it had gotten a lot of hype because of the award season, and the filmmakers have been very vocal in the press. And I was checking to see, because obviously you hope that it would be available in theaters in some way, in some limited release maybe even. But there wasn't any distribution in America, huge surprise. But there was a distribution deal offered by a company called Mubi, M-U-B-I. But Mubi is also accepting a large investment from Sequoia Capital, which has ties to the occupation. So for the filmmakers, and I respect it, it's their film, they didn't want to cooperate with people. If they're having a film that shows the problems of the occupation, it doesn't make sense to also partner with somebody who is invested with a company that is contributing to the occupation. So I respect that. Anyway, the film is available, and I really suggest you watch it. There's so many things to recommend the film. Let me start with the fact that it talks about the West Bank. And the reason that's important is because not that Gaza doesn't deserve our attention. Of course it does. Of course it does. But the challenge is that all of our attention being on Gaza means that East Jerusalem and the West Bank can have more pressure applied on them by the Israelis, and no one notices because all the attention is on Gaza at the moment. So it's a strategic move. And Masefer Yatta is this collection of 20 villages that we focus on here. What's astonishing about this documentary is that it was, in a sense, many years in the making. His family, he comes from an activist family. Basel Adan is the name of our young man who is at the center of the documentary. And his parents have been videotaping their lives for many years. And so you see him in happy moments, but also in moments of great pain and um, tragedy. So we see that, but he goes around documenting expulsions. And so we first get to see the West Bank. Secondly, we're seeing the things that we read about, those of us who are following the Palestinian cause. We see the expulsions. We see the settlers coming and throwing stones and attacking villagers. We see the military standing by and doing nothing about it. We see schools getting bulldozed. And even you hear a child says, why do they have to destroy the toilet? You can see the demolition is destroying the shower. At one point, they destroy a chicken coop. What's astonishing about this documentary is it's not done in the normal documentary style. It's shot with, I have to imagine, our expensive cameras because of how beautiful the cinematography is and the camera quality. Obviously, sometimes we're using footage from a handheld camera and it's a bit grainy, but it ties in very well with the regular shots. I think there were a lot of high definition GoPro cameras put in different parts of vehicles, and sometimes we're actually in the footage as Basel's being attacked and he's running, and you can see the shaking camera. So what's unusual about it is that it feels like a film, but you know it's real life. The reason it feels like a film is because it's so well shot and so well documented, and there's a great harmony in how he takes us between present day and his memories and filling people in who are new. I think that's what's nice about the documentary is you don't have to know anything. You don't have to know anything about anything. All you have to do is hand somebody this film and say, just watch it. Just say and watch it, see what you think. Because he'll talk about the fact that our villages were on maps in the 19th century, that his ancestors have been there since the 1830s. So these were small villages, rural, near caves, and they had goat herds, they had olive orchards, and you see that we find out much later in the film that there was a discovery of a secret Israeli document that purposely extended their military training ground into these areas to stop the Arabs from growing. It was, I think, what it said in the document, to stop Arab expansion. So they didn't need the military land, even if we're granting their perspective, which is it's their land. The Jews own everything, and they're just expanding this military training exercise. They were deliberately expanding it so that they could say, well, it's illegal for you to be on a military training ground. You have to leave. And then they would come and demolish these houses. And as I've talked about in other film clubs, the unbelievable resilience of the Palestinians. So many times we would see them in the evening smiling, laughing, joking, not losing their humanity in all of this, as much as they have every reason to. They refuse to. Always smiling, always welcoming. The Israeli who comes, I think his name is Yuval. So they identify, so you're an Israeli, so you're one of those human rights Israelis, huh? That's the phrase they use. I don't know what the phrase is in Arabic. But he is trying to help, and he has a real passion, which is a wonderful compliment to Basel's. So the soldiers jeer him, say, you're a self-hating Jew, you're acting against Jews, etc. And they say, why do you care? And he says, because this is being done in my name. And it's the same reason I think perhaps I and other Americans who feel affinity for the Palestinian cause, why we act or speak as we do. It's because it's also being done in our name. These weapons are not only being dropped on Palestinians in our name, in alliance with our greatest ally in the history of the world, allegedly, but it's being funded by our tax dollars. So just as Yuval feels that pain and feels that desire to ameliorate the situation for the Palestinians, what I also loved was Basel's counterpoint to him, just saying, you've been here just a few minutes, but this has gone on for decades, and a change isn't going to come today. It's not going to come tomorrow, but it will come. And he uses a beautiful visual analogy to this. He talks about a water drop. He says one water drop doesn't change anything, but if the water keeps dropping, things change because water is so powerful over time. And Basel's maturity in this really shines through. He feels like a 70-year-old man in the way that he thinks and moves and talks. And part of that is he's just very tired. He's, woken up in the middle of the night sometimes to go film a demolition or an invasion or an attack. And we also see one of his family members, a brother, get shot and become paralyzed. And by the end of the documentary, we find obviously he's passed away because of the infection. He wasn't able to get proper care. Despite a settler having been the one that shot him, and despite it being captured on camera that he had no lethal intent or even had any lethal means, he was shot by a settler for no reason. And there's a very poignant scene with his mother. His mother is praised by some internationals who stop by to try to take photos and videos and try to meet him. And is it Hunam? I apologize if I'm getting his name incorrect. But he says, just go away. I don't wish to talk to anybody. And that's his right. He doesn't want to necessarily be used in this way. But the mother makes the point. She says, plenty of people have come here, but nothing's been done. And the international that's talking to her says, well, you're very strong, and immediately deflects. She says, the strength comes from God, right? She doesn't want to take any credit from that. As I've said before, not only do we see humor and a great deal of humanity in Palestinians, but we see this unbelievable theological aspect to them, many of them. I'm not saying all, but so often in all these documentaries we've done, coming up on 36 now, films and documentaries, there is this enormous theological aspect to their lives. Always a relationship to God. God have mercy. And she feels the weight of it. Now, the camera's on her. And I think the thing is, when you have cameras around you enough in a documentary, you can forget that you're there and you can slip back into being yourself instead of thinking, oh, I'm on camera, I should watch what I'm saying. And you can see, in a moment of grief, she's looking off camera and her eyes filled with tears. And she says that I pray that God take him from this life in his mercy, effectively. And how pained she was. She, as a mother, we've seen those videos of a car rolling onto a child and a mother somehow lifting the car. There's some sort of maternal instinct that will protect the child at all costs. And you can see her articulate this. I want to protect my child. If I could give my life for him so that he would not be paralyzed, she would have done that. But feeling the weight of all that and seeing that these journalists and cameramen would come by, take photos, try to talk to her son, and nothing was done, she said, I pray that God in his mercy will take him from this life. Again, noting that they don't believe that this is it. They know that there's another life and that there's accountability related to that. Obviously, I don't agree with the Islamic worldview or their theological outlook, but I deeply respect. I've always said that they live as they think. This is what animates who they are, and it just comes out involuntarily. She doesn't have to think about it. She doesn't have to ponder. When the person says, you have so much strength, she says, strength comes from God. She just says it right away. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with my faith, what I believe, and the context for this. And she is the one who gives us the title of the film, because she's responding when someone says, well, would you consider going somewhere else? I'm trying to remember if it was an antagonistic. I don't think it was because she doesn't say it in an antagonistic way. I think someone was just asking, what will you do? Could have been a fellow villager. It just was, well, we can't go anywhere else, that we have no other land. And either her or someone else articulates, this is our land. That's why we have to fight and suffer for it. And that's just something I don't think most people get. I don't think most people are as attached to the land as these people are. We see this early in the documentary as well. He asks Yuval, who's from the Israelis call it Beersheba. And the Palestinian says, well, can you forget where you were born? Okay. And he says, no, never. And he says, well, neither can we. We can't forget where we were born. We're attached to it. And as I've said before, this sentiment is lost on many Westerners, particularly in a very mobile society like the United States, where people move for school, or they move for marriages, or they move for better job opportunities. It's not really thought of deeply. Americans will instinctively move for better opportunities, whatever that means. But we wouldn't ever pass. It's very rare that we would pass up an opportunity. I'm just speaking for myself, as I consider American and on my attitudes. I've been very mobile as well. I went away from where my family was for college. I moved somewhere else for work. So I consider myself pretty much in the norm for how Americans think about mobility. And that's why I'm so in admiration of the people who are so connected by place to where they are and where they're from. So you'll see them, they get their houses demolished, and there are caves nearby some of these places. So their homes get demolished in the morning, and sometimes you can see them moving their stuff out, because and that's one of the more poignant recurring scenes. You can see the bulldozer, just a lone bulldozer here. But a lot of times we'll see an opening of a scene and you can see the police cars and the bulldozers coming. This is sort of lonely procession. And this is something normal in this perverse, wicked country of Israel. They just have a procession of bulldozers, police cars. They push this villagers away, and then they demolish their school. They demolish a home. They demolished a chicken coop. The illegal Palestinian chickens who could not possibly be allowed to have a home. And these people, they would try to stop. They would non-violently resist. You'd see, young children putting themselves in front, but they're not hitting, they're not throwing rocks. They're just saying, I'm not just going to sit here and let you do this. I will stand up to you. And it's astonishing. And how are they repaid for this? We see some instances of beating, and obviously the famous one towards the end of the documentary where a settler shoots someone. We see it on camera. It's a very shocking moment for people who are not used to seeing people getting shot in that way and realizing this isn't a film, this is real life. that they then take their belongings and move into a cave. And the Palestinians run electrical wire down there, and they're not leaving. Now, towards the end of the film, you see there's more pressure applied and more people do move. They move to one of the more crowded Palestinian cities, and they have to get some other kind of job instead of living off of the land in a subsistence way as they and their families have for generations. We also see some of them going to school as best they can and learning. And this is something that's often underreported. They're one of the most, if not the most literate Arab population in the Middle East. Palestinians, in a sense, have had to learn, and it comes from the Naksa generation who had been educated in the UNRWA schools after 1948. And they realized the value of an education. A lot of them spoke English, learned English, and then made sure their children could get as much education as possible. And that's been passed down. So that's something else that may take people off guard. And that's why I say you can hand this film to somebody who doesn't really know anything other than they know something bad is happening in Palestine. And this film will be a full immersion into the discussion for them. They're going to see the occupation. So they're going to see people living on their land, the land that they've lived on for centuries, being illegally pushed out by Israeli military in a brutal way, in a cruel way, in an immoral, illegal, unlawful, every adjective you can think of. They can see it. They can see that the people are resisting in a non-violent way. They're just trying to stand up for their rights, but they're not assassinating Israeli generals or anything. They're just there trying to stand for their land. We then see an Israeli, what they call a human rights Israeli, trying to collaborate with Basel and his family, and over he's welcomed. And in fact, one time towards the end of the film, a man who Yuval meets early on, where he says, "Oh, you're the human rights Israeli," he says, "I don't know how much longer I can keep talking to you like this, because you're going to go home and you're part of what's happening to me." But you can see there that the Palestinian is very capable of separating the person, the man that they meet, that they welcome. "Would you like some coffee with ginger?" Nasser, who's Basil's father, says, "Come in. This guy's an Israeli and was going to train to be part of the intelligence wing in the IDF before he learned Arabic. And he said, I had a political awakening when I learned the language." And that's a great insight that people should think about when they learn languages, that it is a politicization, whether you like it or not. When I learned French, I learned a lot more about French history, even though I had already had a love and desire of French history. When you learn the language, there's just deeper insight. So he couldn't learn Arabic and not get insight into what really happened. So he learned Arabic, awakened politically, and then came back and wanted to do something. So he's welcomed into every Palestinian home. They say, "Oh, you're an Israeli," and they want to talk to him. They don't say you're an Israeli and then try to stab him. That's what the Israelis would have you believe. Every Palestinian's a terrorist. They hate us. They train their children to hate us. And yet you can see Yuval playing with Palestinian children who are laughing and smiling. I think that's another thing I'm always surprised by. These are children who have not forgotten how to laugh or smile, despite what's been done to them. Despite the fact that they have every reason not to laugh and smile, they still laugh and smile. And even they scroll on a smartphone, and the mom's saying, "Hey, go to bed, hand me the phone," because she's got to catch up on the news of the day and see what was happening. And also, too, the sense of politics that he says, Basel's been trained in law, but he says, our economy is destroyed. All I can do is work in construction. He has a law degree. And what would you like to do? Anything other than this? And that's the whole thing, is they can't even exercise those ideas. Everything is about the moments and surviving. And I've shared this before on a discussion, that when I was in Lebanon, we were walking into a cave, and the tour guide and I, we were animated, but we weren't disagreeing with each other. We were trying to top each other and say, "Well, did you know this?" And then he would say, "Well, did you know this?" And we were talking about different sort of Jewish crimes in Israel. And the gentleman who was letting us into the tourist monument said to him in Arabic, "It's always politics, isn't it?" Or something like, "Politics never ends." My Arabic is not even beginners. It's like whatever is below beginner, that's me. And in any case, he says, yeah, so he's saying that politics never ends. And that's what's happening in these discussions. You see him come over, the gentleman says, because he's telling Yuval, like, I don't know if I can let you come here anymore. You're an Israeli, because he's frustrated with yet another demolition that he's had to deal with. And he says, hey, forget about politics. We need to move this lady's toilet or something like that for her. And they both stop what they're doing and they go help this lady. And it just shows you that ultimately they are convinced of their cause, but what they want to do on a daily basis is just help each other. And they do that in the villages. And it's astonishing, it's edifying. And there's a meta commentary in the film as well. They're in a cafe. They were in a cafe in Hebron, and then they're coming back, and then I think they're sitting and having a smoke and talking, and says, well, what can we do? People see things and they feel touched, and then what? Obviously that's a meta moment, because we're watching a film, we might be getting touched, and then what? So I think they left that meta question in the film because it's breaking the fourth wall. It's asking you directly, well, what are you going to do about it? And as I've said before, people say, well, what can I do? I feel overwhelmed. I've always said, do what you can within your circumstances, with whatever talents you have and with whatever means you have. So if you are somebody who can make things, maybe you make something and you can sell it. I've shared earlier this week, I should have had them ready to go, but I'm not a maker of things, but I had a designer make a design, and we have these stickers, which I'll mention too in the next stream, because it's specifically to support the Hin Rajab Foundation. But I can't design, but I hired a designer and we made some stickers. So we're going to donate 100% of the profits of these stickers to the Hin Rajab Foundation. So maybe you do that. Maybe you write articles. Maybe you share things on social media. Maybe you donate some of your time to something. The point is, you can do something. But as Basel tells us, it's just a drop of water, but many drops of water, and many drops of water over time will do something. Have their patience. They have much more reason to be impatient than we do. Much, much more. But if they can be patient, if Basel can show us, say, listen, it's not going to happen today, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but what matters is that you keep doing what is right. And that can be such a great inspiration to us. And I take great inspiration from it. I think you would too. If you haven't, because of how it's set up, almost a lot of the money that you spend if you buy this on streaming is going to go to the filmmakers, which I think is great. So do your best to get it wherever you do your best to watch it, is what I'm saying. And when watching it, consider just spending the $5 or $10, whatever it might cost, to support the filmmakers and their work. Astonishing film, one of the best, certainly the best film on the occupation in the modern era that I've seen. So that's not saying much, because what I'm saying effectively is any film after 2015. So after Protective Edge and Cast Lead, when we have a post-Oslo crazy reality, this film fills in that gap. Whereas a lot of the documentaries I've covered in Film Club, I've been trying to set the stage with history so that we are prepared for the bigger discussions. So this is a very, very new film. I think they finished filming 2024. Yeah, we're coming towards the end of 2025. So it's a very current film. It feels like right out of the headlines. It feels right out of every news feed we've been watching. So I can't recommend it enough. And as I say, it's a great way to introduce friends who feel maybe overwhelmed. I think a lot of the time, the challenges with Palestine Bookshelf, I've even had a couple of very close friends. A friend I've had, one, he was a former student of mine. I've known him for 20 years. And he said, I'm overwhelmed by all the stuff all the reviews you do. I don't even know where to start. He's like, I just want you to do a primer. I said, there's no primer. There's if you look at the categories on Palestine Bookshelf, there's more than a dozen different categories, because there's different things that have to be covered. We have to talk about the settlements. We have to talk about the occupation. We have to talk about Zionism. We have to talk about the Israel lobby. We have to talk about 1948. We have to talk about 1967. We have to talk about 1973. We have to talk about the first Intifada. We have to talk about the second Intifada. We have to talk about Oslo. So I don't have a I don't have a 5-minute episode to get you caught up, but as I say, with this documentary, you can kind of do that. because film moves faster than reading. It's more immediate and people can see the images. And from there, you can ask them if they watch this documentary, say, well, what were you most interested in learning more about? Do you want to learn more about the settlements? Do you want to learn more about the occupation? Do you want to learn more about the West Bank? In general, do you want to learn more about Zionism, about, Israeli politics? What is the military government inside the occupied territories? Why the states from 1967? There's so many different ways that we can direct them, but this film provides the gateway to that. So I can't recommend it enough, and I can recommend it in a way that I haven't been able to recommend other films because I feel sometimes those other films require more context. So, for example, I did one on Children of Shatila this summer, and in order for people to understand that, I have to get to, well, why are you in Lebanon? I thought we were talking about Israel. Okay, well, then I have to explain about expulsion and then say, okay, well, what happened in 1982? Then I have to explain about the massacre. So you have to give more context, even though that film's heartbreaking, very difficult to watch. This, you don't need the context because it's present day. We know what was happening, and this film gives us the Palestinian perspective, what the Zionists would call the Palestinian narrative. And by Palestinian narrative, we mean the truth, right? It's what we can see with our eyes. We believe that 2 + 2 = 4. We believe when the camera shows war crimes that they are war crimes. We don't need any Hasbara telling us about that God gave them this land and so war crimes are okay. Let's see what's in the chat. There are Muslims who live as they believe, and there are a majority, in my opinion, who don't, just like any religion. Well, moving targets, I can't comment much on Muslims. I don't know many Muslims outside of the ones that I've met in the Muslim countries I've visited, and some have become friends. But I don't necessarily interrogate them about their correspondence of their religious beliefs to their personal lives, but I wouldn't say that any of the ones I've met have been particularly immoral in the way that they've lived their lives. But sure, as you say, in any religion, there are people who don't really believe what they believe because their actions tell you, right? Don't listen to what people say, watch what they do. So I'm not saying the Muslims are any different from Catholics in this way. Catholics are just as guilty of it. But that's the whole point is if you're going to have a religion, why not just follow it? Otherwise, what's the point? There's no point in having a religion if you're just going to, do it on Tuesdays and not on Wednesdays. Sam, Israel is evil in a form of state, a fake temporary state. Yes, Sam, the temporary aspect of it may be longer rather than shorter, but you're right. It is what it is. Thank you for what you do. Thanks for that. And he just mentioned Sabra and Shatila, wanted to make sure that people knew what I was referencing. So you can go to the lives tab on the channel and scroll back, I want to say 2 or 3 film clubs, and you'll see a film, Children of Shatila. I think Mai Masri was the director. Fantastic short film, heartbreaking. But she's a fantastic director and storyteller. So you can see in the description for the film, always in the description for the film club, I'm generally going to point you towards a resource for how you can watch what we're going to discuss, because that's always the goal. I want you to watch it. So before we discuss it. Anyway, I said there was a double feature. I have to end this stream and then I have to enter the other stream to talk about the Hind Rajab Foundation. There's a Arabic language Al Jazeera documentary talking about the Hind Rajab Foundation. So I'm going to talk about that in about 30 seconds. If you just stay on the channel and navigate over to the lives and see the next one, where it's called The Tip of the Iceberg is the name of the news program. And I will be on there to talk about the Hind Rajab Foundation. Thank you for joining today. And if you have questions or comments, you missed the live, please put them and let's keep the conversation going.